Well, good afternoon. I think we've had a really good convention so far. So I was appointed as a COOL committee chairman, and so I'll kind of get started with that. We've had a really busy year. Maybe. Oops, gotta back up here. Going too far. So this is kind of just a little gesture about the food supply stuff that's going on. Lab-grown meat, $39.99. Cricket paste, $18.99. So that's give you an idea why you might want labeling here in the near future. So just kind of one thing you might want to look at. This screen's not coming up over here. Is that? So MCOOL, busy is an understatement. And I tell people that because I just finished coming back about 3 weeks ago from Washington, D.C., and we still hear a lot about the WTO ruling. And so I want to clarify a little bit about the WTO ruling. 12/10 and 19, President Trump dismantled basically the WTO at that time. And so since then, the appellate panel has been in disarray. So we're working on that to try to educate the Congress people and their staffers about the WTO ruling. We're working also, Bill Bullard, myself, Brett Kinsey, several of us for about 14 months on a new piece of legislation we put out. It was called the AMP Act, Agricultural and Marketing Production Act. It actually is a fairly extensive deal. We have about 8 sections in it. It's over 40-some pages. We spent 14 months working on it. It includes American Beef Labeling Act, a lot of different reforms. We got the OFF Act too with the checkoff. So we've been working on a lot of things, but the Beef Labeling Act is the best thing we can do right now, and we're getting some support. So with that, we've got Wyoming representative today, of course, Harriet Hageman, and everybody heard from her. She's done a great job in promoting some teeth in this deal about the fraudulent labeling that's been going on. So we're really happy to have her on board and trying to get some other people involved. Kana, one of the representatives from California, is on the bill. It's House Bill number 5081. And we've also, with the other Senate we've got is Senate Bill 52. And we've got a kind of a bipartisan mix on that bill to support that. So a lot of the people up here in Montana, we get Tester and Thune and Rounds and those guys. So it's a good bill, but it's a bipartisan bill, and we're hoping we can get that done. The American Beef Labeling Act would restore the mandatory country of origin labeling as we once knew it. It also eliminates and restores the bill because it puts beef and ground beef in different areas back into the existing 2002 MCOOL bill. So it should, if it's passed, it'll take action within 1 year. So we would get to see that again. I brought a deal, when I was putting the presentation together, Bill and the staff went over some stuff, and they had done a survey here response. If you go to labelourbeef.com, it's kind of interesting to look at, and you can read the results. That's just a quick narrative of what went on. About 64% in one deal strongly support it, and 22% do support it. So that's an 86% report of people supporting mandatory country of origin labeling. I think that's pretty important. It showed during that slide, the response deal was 86% then support that. 90% of the voters were concerned that the foreign beef importers of beef could legally put a product of the USA label on it and containing beef that was born, raised, and harvested outside of the United States. And we've seen that happen. I have a friend who was one of the largest beef procurement buyers, had Australian beef come into the United States that was unlabeled, and when they repackaged it, they sent it to the retail stores, and they wanted to know if they could put a USA beef label on it. That's fraudulent, and we're trying to stop that. So that's one of the issues we're working on. The American Beef Labeling Act would help that. Hageman's bill would help that. We put some teeth in it, so we've got something we can go on. 77% of the voters believed it was important that the beef they purchased was raised, born, and harvested in the United States during that study that was done for RCAF. Those are just some important things that kind of went on with that. Key survey findings: American made, 3/4 of the respondents. It's important where it was born, raised, and harvested. Concern over food safety regulations, again, was another important item that was brought up. Those things, it seems like common sense, but when you get to D.C., you find out that common's not so common. Support for the American Beef Labeling Act is pretty strong. 86% of the voters support the legislation. While we were in D.C. Working on another bill, we brought up the OFF Act and the American Beef Labeling Act, so they do know that. I'll be going back in September. We're following up with more meetings, and hopefully we can get something done. But we really need to find some more sponsors with this bill. This is the one with Representative Hageman's proposal, and I realize she already talked about all this, but you guys can kind of read through it, how it was kind of kicked down the road for more than 20 years, and now we're kind of wanting to specify the country of origin, and it remains as one of the agriculture's biggest beefs, that it's not labeled correctly. We're just glad that she's doing that. So that's, you know, $5,000 a pound is a pretty significant fine. It might get some attention. We just get enforcement. This is another study that was done. This was done in October of 2022 by USDA. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it's analyzing consumers' value of the product USA claim. So we went through that, and I'll flip through the page here a minute. Based on the results, consumers do notice the product of the USA claim. And it was said that they had a deal there called how much consumers were willing to pay for the meat products bearing the product USA label. So with that, you can kind of read down through here a little bit. It showed that about 53% that completed the survey were panelists that supported this deal, and of the whole survey, 67.5 was the total of people that completed every part of the survey for USDA and said it was important that they knew where the food came from. During the survey, it was also interesting that so many of the people were misled by the USDA label. So there's a clarification on that now. People are trying to get that right. They did not understand that didn't mean the product was of USA. And we've all, if you've been here before, you've heard that. I mean, that's been a concern as we went forward. Based on the results, eligible consumers were willing to pay more for meat products of the Product USA labeling claim. And likewise, eligible consumers were willing to pay more for meat products when more production steps take place in the United States. And this is interesting. This was the amount of people that were screened. The response was they sent out like 13,000. They got back 7,100. And then on the second part was 7,000, and they got back 4,800. So that's a 62% deal. So basically what I said at the bottom was it's over a 40% response ratio, which makes it a valid and legal survey. So as we go forward here, you'll see why. So this is what that report said, what consumers were, the knowledge regarding labeling meant to them. About 63% incorrectly identified the product. They didn't know. We had 21% were not sure, and then 16% correctly identified product of the USA labeling. So we have some education to do, and we're not getting any help from our counterparts. So this was an interesting point I pulled out of there. The average consumer was willing to pay $3.21 more for a 1-pound New York strip steak that includes product of the USA claim over one that does not. And I think that's a pretty important deal. We've seen that time and time again. Analyzing what consumers value as a product of the USA labeling claim, it said in here that the average consumer was willing to pay $3.67 more for a pound of steak made from cattle that were born, raised, and slaughtered and processed in the United States, and as an identical steak made from cattle that were only processed in the United States. So there's value when it comes to correctly labeled product in the United States. We need that. Based on these forced rankings with limited choices, the product the USA claim was often equal importance to price and other labeling claims. So if you guys get a chance, go to the USDA labeling deal and do that. I read through there, maybe print it out, share it with your neighbors. Let me go back here just a second. Missed one of my deals. One of my slides, and I didn't put it on here, I guess, they determined that too few of the respondents understood the Product of the USA labeling claim to be able to determine whether the willingness to pay differed from the respondents who did not understand the claim. And I joke because I put a beef checkoff logo there, you know. That would have been a simple deal they could have promoted, you know, so we understood about Product of the USA, but they haven't helped us. So here was some frequency charts with eligible consumers look for when their Product of the USA claims when they're shopping. Ground beef, it shows that about 43% of the people most of the time look for it, 32% all of the time, and or never seen the claim, was 32%, and 25% was sometimes. When you get to the New York strip part, the middle, get to the middle one, the same chart says the same thing, you know, never seen the claim was about 27%, 48% sometimes, most always, and then 25% were sometimes, the gray area. So pork tenderloin, same kind of message, you know, a lot of times people never see these claims. So I don't know if I buy that, but I think as consumers are more educated, I think they're going to get better with doing that. The summary here, there's where the checkoff I said should have done something. I posted that in there being smart aleck, but you know, they've done nothing to help U.S. product and only goes on exported products as we know. So the percentage of eligible consumers who reported the product most of the time, the claim averaged 43% on ground beef to about 48% on a New York straight steak, and I think that's important that they, at least there's a bigger percentage starting to pay attention. So hopefully we're going to see some of that show up in the market as it continues. We've got some really curious things going on right now. My next slide here, and this kind of ties into country of origin labeling, but the calf crop issues, I call it a guesstimate. You know, we come in with a calf crop of 35.1 million head. We're decreased to 1.2% from 2020. 22 cow inventory is 30.1 million head, down 2.3 from 2021. And the heifer inventory with total heifers at 19.8. Cattle inventory, as I say, there's down. I mean, it's crazy. You know, we get 3% total numbers of cattle. I would be cautious and say that could even be stronger than that. We've had some significant rains that helped some in northwest Kansas, and some of you guys I've talked to have had adequate rainfall too. There are still areas of the country that are in a big drought, so we still have some concerns. All cattle and calves, as they say down there, 89.3 million head, 3% below the 92.1 million head as reported of January 1 of 2022. All cows and heifers were 38.3 million head, down 3% below the 39.4 million head. And then the beef cow inventory was 28.9 million head. They were down 4% from a year ago. And then you throw in the milk cow deal. Understand that's going to create some issues. In my area, they've got a lot of people feeding cattle that are dairy-bred cattle. They're crossed with beef cattle now. They're black-hided and they're in the feed yards. So those of you that were here last year seen my chart. Cool. We witnessed a rancher and feeder prosperity in 2014 with about $82 billion, close to $82 billion. And then since they defeated Cool in 2015, we watched the market crash. And then here we come to 2022. Well, it reported the other day, I just looked it up, was at $86.8 billion. And this is higher prices, $13.9 billion in value. So cattle sales last topped $80 billion in 2014. And we all know, I mean, these high prices could come at great cost. So I don't think, it's not that we're not entitled to it. Consumer beef prices have stayed relatively the same. I had people call me about the price of beef and stuff when they go to the market. They're all cringing too, you know, but our costs haven't gone down. And everything we do as a producer or rancher, it costs more money to operate. So, You don't buy that 1975 Chevy pickup anymore for 5 calves. It'd probably take 15. Imports, this has been my big kicker all along, 2023. Cattle imports are up 6% from 2022. And the imports were about 498,000 head of cattle so far, 5.7% from 2022. We've imported 317,000 head of cattle from Mexico. That's up 32% from 2022. And Canada, we're down. I was kind of surprised, but we're down 21.8% from 2022 in the numbers. So the bottom of the chart there shows you where the Mexican and Canadian cattle industry's at, imports to our country, what's going on. And this slide I played last year, and I still think it's real relevant, and I think people really need to pay attention to it because I think it's a lot of wording, and it's very important. The Brazilian foreign government money and intrusion. And everybody knows what I think of the Marfrig and JBS purchase of the 2 biggest beef packers in the United States. But Brazilian Beef Exporter Association predicted the cattle numbers in South America will expand by an unprecedented 24 million head by 2030. And we have 28 million head of cattle, of cows. They have about 155 million head of cattle in Brazil. Total cattle are like 232 million head. That's crazy. And if you don't think they're coming here, you better pay attention. So, like the sheep industry, all they got to do is bring in imports. So, 232 million head down here underlined, I guess, so that's where we're at. But this is a big deal. And I can't stress it enough. We really need to pay attention whether we're going to keep taking all these imports, because they're coming. They're planning on this market. They said in there that, as you read below the underlying deal there, with a cattle herd of approximately 232, almost 20% of its production destined for foreign markets. So we'll go ahead. USDA facilitates imports. I've said before, show me a check for 1 cent for a pound of beef, bushel of grain from a multinational corporation to a USA producer or exporter for a grain product we raise, for any product we raise. We get nothing. Multinationals capture it all. Restore and cool in the wake of the WTO ruling. I kind of got to get through these for everybody. Reduced record keeping, all the things there. I've got the slide presentation. We'll share it with you. It'll be posted on the website for RCAF when we're done. House Bill 7291, 5081 with Hageman. We need sponsors and we need them passed. And you're with us or against us. And a lot of people are fighting against us because of the money. So it's kind of short, brief, and to the point. If you guys have any questions, give us, stop us here, talk to myself or Bill. We need members for the Cool Committee. Be glad to work with anybody and everybody.